Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 29th, 2015. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, homebrewer Dennis Pike joins us again for Part 2 of his experiments brewing Hefeweizen. In Part 1, Dennis played with yeast pitching rates to see how they affected the banana and clove character of the style. In Part 2, Dennis looks at fermentation temperature. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And if you buy any of our DVD combos, you get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook at facebook.com/Basic Brewing. We're on the Google Plus as well. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you the show. We greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows Phone app. We're on the BlackBerry Podcast Directory. We're on the Stitcher app. We're just every darned where. And if you put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. And thanks to everybody who's done so already. And I'm still sending out notices, links to people who do that for the first time, and with links to the video and the PDF from last year's bonus video. So you will still get that as well. Let's jump right into things with a look into the mailbag, shall we? If I can talk this week, I don't know. I got a thick tongue. Jason from Golden, Colorado writes, I was listening to your podcast today. You mentioned you had sticky faucets and even had some handles break. Did you ever try the Perlick type faucets that have a forward sealing mechanism? Jason says, after I switched to these, I had no more issues. They are pricey, but well worth it. Thanks, Jason. You know, Sticky Faucets was my favorite Stones album, but that's another thing. So far, I've been both too lazy and cheap to replace my kegerator taps, but I've heard good things about those the Perlick type faucets. I appreciate that, Jason. Our buddy Scott Couay wrote in with a lot of good information. You may remember Scott from the coffee roasting show way back, and I'm afraid to look at how long ago that was. Anyway, this past week, Phil Proctor talked about his homemade glycol chilling system, and Scott writes, being very DIY and sometimes a bit frugal, in quotes, some folks might try to save dollars by using antifreeze, which is also glycol, but the wrong kind. Antifreeze is ethylene glycol, which is very poisonous and has a sweet taste that kids and pets like. And what you want to use is food-grade propylene glycol. It will cost more, but a lot less than a trip to the emergency room. That's a very good point there, Scott. Now, I assume that homebrewers would know to use only food-grade propylene glycol in their brewing equipment. But it's a good idea to have a reminder, never, 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 never use the stuff that goes in your car. Keep it well away from anything that you might ingest. Good safety tip. Also last week, I recommended that if you're going to start kegging, I didn't see how you could do it without having a refrigeration system. Well, whenever you say never, somebody comes up and says, well, I do it that way. Well, Scott lives in the Detroit area, Scott Couay, and with the use of his basement, being in Detroit, it's apparently practical. Scott says, I've kegged for the last 4 years, and the kegs are in the open in the basement. I'm planning to make a kegerator, but mostly because of the summer. There are some catches to this, though. One is that in the summer, it gets into the high 60s in the basement, and that is too warm for pretty much everybody, and summer brews really lend themselves to being cold. You can chill it down by being really un-PC and putting ice in your glass, or Or a better solution, especially for guests and parties, etc., is to put the kegs in a tub with ice. Since the siphon tube draws from the bottom, you really only need the bottom 1/3 or so in ice. The other catches are related. Because colder beer holds more CO2, chilling the beer will lower the carbonation. Oh, chilling the beer after it's been sitting around at room temperature will lower the carbonation, I assume. So, for instance, if you are sending samples you have dispensed into bottles for a competition, say, you need to add some carb tabs and let the bottles re-ferment. That is a PITA, pain in the nether regions, in other words. Since the minute the tabs hit the beer, you need to cap as fast as you can, or you will end up with a fountain. And your final carb level is a bit of a shot in the dark. Scott says, related, if you chill the kegs, the regulator will recarb the beer over a day or two, and then you go back to serving at basement temp. You will get a lot of foam until the excess CO2 comes out of solution. So there you go. He says, in the winter, it's not really a problem. Nobody has had a problem with beer in the mid-50s. There is one other possible issue, Scott says. CO2 is tart-tasting, and cold inhibits the ability to taste sweet, so you might need to tweak your recipes, since both factors will make your beer slightly sweeter in taste if you keep your kegs at cellar temps. So there you go. If you're going back and forth between a warmer space and a colder space with the kegs and especially with the CO2 attached, you might have some issues there. But I appreciate all the information there, Scott. If you have the right climate and space and you don't mind a bit of hassle, you can has kegs and no refrigeration unit. Appreciate that, Scott. This past Friday, I posted our Oktoberfest episode of Basic Brewing Video, and I hope that shed some light on the mystery that has been my accidental session Oktoberfest. I brewed it with the electric brew-in-a-bag system that I got from our sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. And every time I talk about that system or show it, I get a lot of questions. People are really curious. How efficient is it? Does it really work that well? Well, I can tell you that I believe my brew-in-a-bag efficiency has gone up, and I haven't done any side-by-side tests with my cooler mash tun, mainly because I think that thing may be permanently retired now, but I think I am at least doing as well in efficiency as the old way that I used to use. Number one, my mash rest temperature is now being held rock solid. I used to lose several degrees over 60 minutes, even with the cooler, but now I can extend that rest to 90 minutes or more if I want without losing any temperature. And better yet, I can do step matches and continuous or mash outs just by pushing a button on the electronic controller. It's almost like cheating. So take a look at the system that I have. You can see Steve and you can see us demonstrate that at High Gravity Brew, or rather youtube.com/highdgravitybrew. Or you can check out the whole lineup of electric brewing systems at highdgravitybrew.com. And we thank Desiree and Dave for their continued support. Well, when Dennis Pike was on the show before, he shared an experiment comparing the effects of 3 different pitching rates on Hefeweizen, just trying to figure out the best rate to get the good banana and clove character of that style. Well, this time Dennis is moving on to test the effect of different fermentation temperatures. Well, Dennis Pike, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
This is part 2 of the Hefeweizen experiment. We got some good response from the first one, and boy, that was a fun one to judge, as well as to learn the results from. Take us back in time and let us in on the details of what round 1 was.
Yeah, it was. This experiment was kind of the same setup. So it was basically brewing a little over 3 gallons of Hefeweizen wort and then splitting it across 3 different 1-gallon batches. And with the first set of experiments, I was trying different pitching rates. So kind of the standard standard pitching rate for ale yeast is 0.75 million cells per milliliter per degree Plato. So just tried different rates. So one was 30% of that kind of normal pitching rate. One was 60%, and one was 120%. And the results were pretty interesting. It seemed that definitely manipulating the pitching rate, definitely the consensus seemed to be that it noticeably affected the beer, and maybe the lowest pitching rate seemed to boost the kind of classic banana esters, and the higher the pitching rate, it was more subdued. It's kind of hard to tell the impact that it had, if that was the phenols or the kind of clove aspect of the Hefeweizen was really changing or not, or if it was just the more banana you had, the less you noticed the phenols. But that was the intent of the first experiment. So this one, we, instead of doing change it up, and so instead of doing the pitching rate, this time modified the temperature.
Yeah, that first round, Steve and I tasted them, and boy, there was a marked difference between the three samples. We thought, I think we guessed wrong as far as which pitching rate went where, but I think we did nail the one that was overpitched, because if I'm remembering correctly, I think it had the least banana and clove character. But we kind of mixed up the guess on the other two.
Yep.
And you also had your homebrew group tested as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Yep.
And
it was there seemed to be not 100% agreement, but just kind of taking all the data as a lump sum. There seemed to be a general consensus that it was the lower the pitching rate that did seem to really boost the banana esters, and the higher the pitching rate, the beer seemed to be kind of bland.
So it was statistically significant, I guess you'd say, the results.
Yeah. If I've learned anything for doing these experiments, it's definitely no two people's palates are identical. So you get some variance there, but it definitely, if you take all the 15 or 16 different testers together, there were some outliers there, but there was. Yeah, I think the numbers were significant. And
one listener who wrote an email that I shared with you was our buddy Don Osborne. And he suggested, and I think that you had already made plans to do so, he said, well, what about now taking your favorite pitching rate and doing different temperatures? And I think that you said you had already, kind of had the wheels in motion to do that. So what temperature did you ferment the first experiment at? They were all fermented at the same temperature.
Yeah. So the first experiment, they were all fermented at 65 Fahrenheit. So and this experiment, I mean, the setup was basically the same. I went ahead and did it basically right away, because I just moved, so all my refrigeration was empty post move. So I had 3 identical chest freezers, and I already had 3 identical Johnson temperature controllers. So I was actually able to have identical kind of fermentation setups. So I figured before I did. Post move, I was able to start brewing again, so I figured I'd better do the experiment before I actually start to fill all that stuff with beer.
So, and just for our metric listeners, 65 is around 18C, I believe. Looking at my chart
I'll
that I got.
Trust you on that one.
Well, I'm looking at a piece of paper hanging on the wall that I printed out from an email from John down in Adelaide, Australia, years and years ago. So, John, if you're still listening, you done me proud by sending me that chart. So which pitching rate did you decide on for this one?
So I there was a pretty even split between with the homebrew club between the 30 and the 60%. So I just kind of at random picked 50%.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, the setup was similar where it was just instead of Breeze wheat DME, I used Munton's wheat DME this time, and it was just to a 1050 was the original gravity. And then instead of Spalt, this time I used Hallertauer, but it was only 10 IBUs. But it was just boiled for 30 minutes, so it was enough Hallertauer at 30 minutes to get 10 IBUs. And then I used the same White Labs WLP 300 Hefeweizen ale. Same as last time. I used a little bit of Whirlfloc and yeast nutrient.
And you've got the ability to actually count cells, right? So
yeah, so just like last time, this time I built up a pretty good sized pitch, although I didn't I didn't build too big a pitch to volcano out of my starter vessel again. So I did learn my lesson, which is really unlike me. So I did a half a liter starter with 50 grams of DME. And a vial of one vial of WLP 300, and I grew that up and then counted it and ended up about 150 billion cells. So with all the 1050 is about 12.5 Plato, and a gallon's about 3,700 some odd milliliters. So with all that math, it's would require for a gallon it'd be just under 18 billion cells. So that was 60 milliliters of that starter. So not a lot for each. But the key there is, everything was the same. It was the same wort. So I did over 3 gallons, then split across 3 fermentation vessels. So the same quantity, and then pitched the exact, swirled it up and then pitched the exact same 60 mils of slurry into each of the 3 fermentation vessels. So everything was the same except for the temperature. But it probably is important to note how the vessels were set up as far as where the temperature probes were. It's just these little 1 gallon jugs. So with my normal homebrew setup, I use thermowells, but with this experiment, the vessels I can't really do thermowells with. So I actually just take the probe, tape it to the side of the vessel, and then insulate it. So, but one thing I definitely have noticed with that is the middle of the beer is actually a different temperature than the side of the vessel. So. Even wherever the temperatures were set, I think at the peak of fermentation, it was probably a couple degrees higher than that is where it would peak out. So just anyone who's doing this at home, a thermowell, you'd probably get a little different results than where I was just taping it to the side of the vessel.
But regardless, the sensors were in the same place on each vessel, so that relative to each other, the temperature differences were equal. They were whether they were 1 or 2 degrees off, they were likely 1 or 2 degrees off in each circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So we're still in the same playing field, trying to limit the variables. So what were the temperatures that you settled on?
Yeah, so I the lowest temp. Oh, and the other thing was all of these were what I did was I cooled them down to 70, and then I put them in their individual refrigerators or freezers, and then I brought them down to their individual temperatures before pitching. So the lowest one was 62 Fahrenheit, the middle one was 66 Fahrenheit, and the high one was 70 Fahrenheit. So so the 62 I brought it down to 62, then I pitched. The 66 I brought down to 66 and then pitched, and the same for the 70. So they were actually pitched at the same temperature that I held the fermentation at. And and then I held the fermentation for they finished pretty quickly. They finished after a couple days, but the 70-degree kicked off much quicker than the other two for sure. It was like half a day before the other two, but they all finished within 2 or 3 days. But I left them in there for a total of 2 weeks to make sure that they had time to clean up. Yeah.
And again, for the metric people, 62, I'm looking at the chart, maybe around 16 C. 66 looks like around, it'd be around, what did I say, 18 C, around there somewhere for that one. And then 70 would be 21, maybe? And I'm guessing, I'm just looking at the lines on this chart. So somewhere out there knows these things. And if you're more curious about being more exact, there's Google and stuff. Anyway.
There's an app for that.
That's right. But if you're just jogging down the streets there in, Canada or somewhere, that'll give you a rough estimate. Yeah. So it's temperature-wise. I mean, that's they're pretty close together. I mean, you didn't go extreme with this. Is there a reason why you chose that temperature range as opposed to like 60 and 80 and a wider range?
So I picked 66 because that's what I've been in that 65, 66 kind of range. And then 62 is there's a bunch of different homebrew forums where there's discussions around these different temperatures, and 62 comes up all the time. Also, there's a couple NHC winning Hefeweizens. I think Gordon Strong kind of started that kind of pro 62. So because I always see a reference to that, and then I figured just kind of pick one that was on the higher end and just kind of space them out at 4 degrees. So if I was at 62 and 66, I'll just go ahead and do 70. And then also maybe people who are just doing it at home without really good temperature control, but doing something like the wet T-shirt or something, that might be a temperature that's they might go for. So kind of want to see what that looked like.
Yeah, what do they call that? A swamp cooler? Is that the technical term for putting your carboy in some water and putting a wet T-shirt on the top of it to keep the temperature down?
We're way too humid in North Carolina for swamp cooler. But I think that's what they're called. We don't have those around here.
We get humid around here as well. We have things called kegerators that I found are really good for keeping things cool. There are ways, as in our low-tech lagering DVD, we demonstrate a way that you can essentially make your own sort of hillbilly glycol cooler system. How to trademark that name. But anyway, there are ways around it. But anyway. So
does it involve parts of an engine block?
Not that you know of. There may be some engine hoses in there somewhere, but now, are there any other details in the? How did you package? I guess we talked about that.
So it was I've just like the last experiment. It was bottle condition. So added enough sugar. They all ended at the same gravity, so I just used the same amount of sugar for all of them, and targeting 3 volumes. So it was 33 grams of table sugar for the. It ended up being just shy of a gallon into the bottling bucket.
And what was the finishing gravity?
It was 10, 12. Yep.
Okay. Interesting. So, as we did in the first one, Steve and I got together and tasted the 3 samples that you sent, and here's how that went. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to the second round of the Hefeweizen experiment.
Thank you, James.
This time, last time we were talking about pitching rates, and this time we're talking about temperature. What is your opinion generally about this experiment as opposed to the first one?
This one's much harder to tell apart. generally, these beers are very close together to me, and so this is a tougher assignment.
I agree. I remember the first one as being fairly differentiated. Like there were fairly marked differences between the three.
Yeah, for sure. On today's trio of beers, and we should say that you swirled up the cookie in each beer, so there's a generous supply of yeast in each one. And when I first smelled the beers, boy, the banana came through like a pile driver on all three. When I first taste the beers, the one that I'm calling number 3, which I know you're calling C, just so we can keep it straight.
I'm going to be using the acrylic alphabet.
That's right. The one with the backward R is that's Cyrillic, not acrylic.
Oh, sorry.
The acrylic alphabet dries a lot quicker. Anyway, the third beer I thought had just a very strong clove and banana taste. But since they've all had a chance to warm for 2 or 3 minutes, which is about how long they've been poured, these beers taste almost exactly alike to me.
I agree that these are very, very close together. It would have been interesting to do a triangle test, doing pick out one different from the other. My first general impression when they were poured was that number 1 had the more banana character and had even like almost a spicy, almost a cinnamony kind of flavor to it. Number 3, now that they've warmed up, to me seems sweeter to me. And I don't know if that's the banana character coming through, but it just seems more sweet to me.
Well, I don't know if I think it's sweeter, but between the 3 beers, that's the one that I think has some difference. And I think it has a little bit more mouthfeel. And maybe that's an unfermentable sugar, maybe something, I don't know anything about the brewing history of these beers. So to me, it has a little bit bigger mouthfeel. It's a little more viscous, but very slightly so. And the other 2, then in comparison, are just a tad more watery. That's not really quite the right word that I want, but they're a little thinner. And that's really about the only difference I really get in these 3 beers.
Yeah, 2 seems a little more kind of bland and thinner, I think is a good description. 1 and 3 seem closer together than 2, now that I'm sipping them warmer. I want to stick with my assertion that 3 seems sweet to me, or sweeter than the other 2. But I don't know how else to characterize that.
I just wonder if we've been suckered.
They're all the same.
The same beer.
Let's see what these idiots do.
Right.
It's all commercial Hefeweizens just blended in. They're all good though.
Yeah,
I mean, we were commenting before we turned on the thing that they were really tasty. Probably good examples of the style.
Well, they've certainly got. I mean, if what you're after in these beers is a big banana clove, spicy wheat beer, then this nails it to death. So they're very good.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to say I'm stumped, but boy, they're close. So since they're so close together, I was gonna suggest that we guess which one is the highest temperature and which one is the lowest temperature and which one is in the middle. But I don't really feel qualified to even make that guess. Meaning, I'm not really sure what they're supposed to do personally. Now you might know. I don't. So I would just be blindly saying A, B, or C, which is usually how I operate in life. But that's how you did the ACT.
That's right. I still scored a 29. But it's very interesting to do something like this. I'm waiting for somebody to send us that Johnny Walker Blue test where we get 3 bottles of that.
With this one, my head split a little more the next morning. No, they're all good, and I can't. I don't know. I can't even hazard a guess. One thing that I would say is that whatever temperature differences there were between these three beers, it apparently did not have as big an effect as the pitching rate.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And again, because I know nothing about the brewing history, I don't know if the temperature difference was 5 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Fahrenheit or more. So there's a lot of variables that I don't have at my fingertips to make any kind of a valid assertion about them. I still, like you, I think the third beer is a little bit different. I think the second beer is a little bit thinner. But unless if I were casually drinking them, at dinner or something like that, I would never think that there was a difference between the three beers.
I just tasted it again. And I think if this were a triangle test, I would say that number 2 was the oddball out, but because number 1 and 3 seem similar to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then again,
well, a triangle test, you count 84 measures, then you hit the triangle once, then you count 98 more measures, and you hit it again.
You go out for a smoke break.
Go out for smoke.
All right. Well, we're useless in this one, I guess. I don't know, well, other than to say that
maybe we're not.
That they're very similar.
Very similar.
Very similar.
Well, and maybe that's just it. Maybe that the temperature doesn't make that much difference.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
We'll see what everybody else says.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, James.
So this time, it wasn't so easy. It was. We were very hard pressed to tell the difference between the three samples. It wasn't at all as easy as the first one to make different observations of each sample. They were really, really hard to tell apart, and we'd go back and forth and back and forth. I think we said on C, it might have had more banana and clove taste at first, but then as it warmed up, that kind of evened out. I thought it might have been the sweetest of the three at one point. B seemed to be kind of the most different, So give us the bad news here, Dennis. How bad were we?
Yeah, I think it was the general consensus in the Homebrew Club, and I kind of triangle tested myself, and 3 was the one that stood out to me as well. But yeah, the general consensus was that 1 and 2 were fairly hard to tell apart, but that actually so 1, they were in order because I'm not very good at changing orders apparently. So 1 was 1 was 62, 2 was 66, and 3, or as you labeled them, C, A, B, and C. C was the 70, and if I've learned anything through all this, is that it doesn't really matter how you make a beer, someone will like it. So again, with this in the Homebrew Club, a couple people did pick 3 as their favorite. And 1 and 2 was the interesting thing is I just kind of assumed that 3 would be the most estery or the most banana-y, I guess, and 1 would be the least. But actually, the general consensus was that the one at 62, had the most banana, and that 2 was actually slightly more balanced, but they were very hard to tell apart.
Huh. Interesting.
And it was kind of the same comments as last time, where it was like big banana, banana forward, heavy banana. So for 1 and 2, and they were pretty close as far as preference. So it was 56% preferred 1 and 30% preferred 2, and only 12% preferred 3 out of the 16 people in my Homebrew Club. And I picked number 1 as well, as did my wife. So it was, seemed like people leaned towards the 62 degree, but it was They were 1 and 2 were I triangle tested those, and I couldn't tell them apart. I thought I could, but I got it wrong. Whereas 3 I consistently picked out as the outlier. Although it still wasn't hugely. It wasn't some huge market difference. It was minor, but it was noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, there were, like I say, this is one of those where, Steve and I were both kind of, after we had, made our notes and we'd talked back and forth after tasting, it was kind of like, well, these could be the same beer if you were to taste them in different orders. I mean, it's one of those things where they were just so close together. Yeah. All 3 I thought were very drinkable. I thought they all had, that classic Hefeweizen, banana and clove character that I guess is the result of the pitching rate. Mm-hmm. So I would have been happy brewing, either of these 3. But I guess if you are, and I guess that that a bunch of the members of your homebrew club are beer judges and experienced in this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I guess if you have an experienced palate, maybe the lower end of that temperature range would be better.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, so the one thing that was interesting with 3 was that was the only one. Well, so the one at 62, people noted flaws, but to people who noted flaws, it was all too much banana. Right? So it wasn't like there's something. Some severe flaw with it. Was just that they thought it was out of balance. For beer 3, the one at 70, there were a lot of people noted flaws that it was, they were subtle, but and it was in kind of the same vein. It was people would either note as apple juice or apple cider, or some people said green apple, or slightly tart. And then some people also noted a ammonia or an alcohol note to it as well, which was I was kind of getting some sort of a kind of a chemical off flavor that was really low, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. But I could definitely see where those descriptors all kind of jive with what I was getting. I just wasn't able to come up with a very good descriptor for it. So the only one that I got, and again, it wasn't, as you're pointing out, it's not like it was this, glaring, terrible beer, but that was the only one where I picked up kind of subtle off flavors. And it seemed, I think of the 16 people, looks like only four of them didn't note some kind of low level flaw on beer 3, and they didn't note flaws on the other 2. So I would take away from that there's some ill, and again at 70, probably at peak fermentation, I would think the core of that beer actually probably got up into like the 72 or maybe even a little higher during the peak of fermentation, just because it wasn't, the temperature probe wasn't in a thermal well. So maybe if you actually were really fermenting it at 70 with and taking your temperature readings with a thermal well, maybe you wouldn't get that. But what appears, you kind of creep up into the 70s, that there is some subtle kind of off flavors that start to show themselves.
And again, that's the kind of lower 20s in the Celsius range. C. I guess I said that C was kind of the sweetest, and Steve, I think, said it had more of a feeling of, or perception of mouthfeel, heavier mouthfeel than the other 2. But these are very slight, very, very slight observations. But and I think on number 1, or A, the 62 degrees Fahrenheit one, I mentioned cinnamon.
Yeah.
And did anybody else mention any other kind of spice?
No. Well, everyone just kind of characterized it as kind of the clove kind of character, but mostly it was people kind of pointing out the banana clove balance and then flaws. So yeah, that could be there. Just no one noted it, but.
I'm just trying to find some salvation there, Dennis. I'm trying to find one nugget of beer judging perception that I can hang my hat on and say I'm not a complete novice.
Yeah, I think. I think both you guys had noted kind of sweeter. I mean, one of the homebrew club members just finished Siebel Brewing School, and he had pointed out it was actually a really good presentation from the MBA Hefeweizen presentation by David Bryant, which is a great. It's just a PDF. You just Google, and it's available online. And it does a really good job of kind of pointing out the different alcohols and esters and phenols and kind of where commercial German Hefeweizens fall. So they actually did measurements on a bunch of commercial examples, and then show you kind of where those average out versus where those esters and phenols and so on sit against thresholds. So you can see that all of them, on average, the isoamyl acetate of the bananas like at least 2x threshold, and then some of them significantly higher than that. But there's a bunch of other esters and actually alcohols as well that are kind of just below threshold. But I could definitely see where if you start fermentation high, the alcohols might start to come through that could, I guess, give you a perception of sweetness. Or it could be these other esters. There's a bunch of, the main one's isoamyl acetate, but there's also these kind of apple or winey or fruity esters that are these fatty acid esters, and like ethyl caproate's the one that gets up closest to threshold at a normal fermentation temperature. So I think if you kind of drive that higher, that might really start to come through. And there's a couple other compounds that kind of come across as solventy or kind of a hot alcohol. So there's ethyl acetate and isobutyl acetate. So and all of those are temperature driven. So I could see where if you start creeping up, you could start to get kind of an alcohol sweetness, and you start to get these kind of apple and cidery kind of characteristics coming through, and then also these kind of mild solventy characters, where again it's not like drinking varnish, but it's just enough there to be noticeable.
Tastes familiar.
Okay.
As Andy Griffith would say. And I have to say that if Steve were here, he would say that he grew up next door to Ethel and Esther. They were twins. We've been working together for so long. I hear him say things when people toss out straight lines. So so we know about pitching rate, and we know about temperature. Mm-hmm. What other variables are there to test out with Hefeweizens?
Yeah. So does without chemically testing all these different samples, I can't say for sure, but my gut from all these results is I'm not convinced that the actual phenols are varying a whole lot. And looking through the technical literature, it looks like that's not really as yeast driven, so pitching rate or temperature driven as the esters are. It's really a matter of how much of these acids are there, specifically ferulic acid is there for the yeast to process and convert to the various different phenols, the big one being 4-vinyl glycol. So that would be one, is to test, does doing no ferulic acid rest versus different lengths. And then also apparently wheat versus barley. Actually, barley apparently has more, will produce more ferulic acid than wheat will. So, you can vary, because most Hefeweizens are in the 50-50 or 60-40 kind of wheat to barley, malted barley. So it's, messing with that ratio, and then also messing around with, the length of your, ferulic acid rest. And then another big one's oxygenation. So the theory goes that if you under-oxygenate, it will stress the yeast out and you'll produce more esters. You also potentially have a lot of other problems if you dramatically under-oxygenate. So it's kind of questionable whether that's a good idea or not, but it's certainly something to mess around with. And actually, another one that's real interesting to me is whether one part is if you spice or not. So if you add fresh wort back in as part of your packaging, but another theory is that bottle conditioning actually creates more phenols than if you were to just force carbonate. So yeah, there's a lot of other variables to kind of mess around with. So with these, it's DME, so I have no idea if Brice or Muntons does any type of ferulic acid rest. And they were oxygenated kind of the way I normally do, which is with 90 seconds of pure oxygen, and then they were all bottle conditioned. So they were all done the same way. So those would be some other things to kind of the different knobs to turn to try and change the ester phenol profile.
Yeah, I mean, moving from, we could probably find out, maybe, if it's not a trade secret, from Brice, what they were doing as far as the preparation of the extracts. But moving into all grain certainly gives you a lot more control, over all of those things. Mm-hmm. So are you going to continue down this path? Are you obsessive enough, Dennis, that you'll move on to the next stage? He said, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to test out the ferulic acid rest, although I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it. I'll probably have to do subsequent batches. Just because it's a lot easier to just do one big batch and then
easier, Dennis.
Yeah, I know. I'm blowing it.
You're a home brewer.
Yeah.
If you want it easy, you'd get Bud Light.
Well, now I've got these results, so my plan is to kind of take all this and one of the beers I'll enter an NHC this year will be a Hefeweizen. So I don't know. We'll see in March how maybe I'll try out a 10-minute ferulic acid rest. We'll see how that goes. I guess we'll find out what the judges think. But yeah, I would like to do the oxygenation. I probably could, except for I have to borrow a DO meter from somebody. But yeah, I'd like to keep messing around with it.
Well, cool. I hope you do, and I hope that you'll remember us on the next round if you do it.
Oh yeah. Now I do kind of have some general takeaways, I guess, from these two experiments. Just kind of summarizing what maybe some basic recommendations from what I saw and all the feedback back from it. AA was that it definitely seems like the pitch rate had a pretty significant impact. And it would appear that, like I said before, some people, there was a subset of people who thought the normal pitch rate or the even over pitch was their preferred beer, but the highest percentage of people definitely preferred the under pitched beer. So I think maybe somewhere in the half of the normal pitch rate would be a good starting point, which as mentioned on that last show is roughly just a vial with no starter into a 5-gallon. If you're doing about 5.5 or 6 gallons into the fermenter to end up with a 5-gallon batch, you could just pitch a vial with no starter, and you'd be at about that pitch rate. around that 0.375 million cells per milliliter per degree Plato. And that the other one was it does seem that somewhere in that kind of 62 to 66 range does seem to be the better fermentation temperature. Still lower, the 62 was preferred, but there was it wasn't a runaway winner. It was the 66 still had a pretty good number, and especially the people kind of wanted a more balanced Hefeweizen, one that was a little less banana forward. Strangely, the lower temperature actually had more banana, which I have no good explanation for, other than maybe other esters were kind of covering up I have no idea. That makes no logical sense to me, but that seems to be the results. So,
and the third result is that you can make a really good Hefeweizen out of extract with a 30-minute boil.
Yep. Yeah. I was very happy with how those beers turned out.
Yeah, I was too. Which it's why I'm interested in another round.
The truth comes out.
I like free good beer. No, well, this has been fun. I think I said the last time that this, the previous experiment, encourages me to make an extract Hefeweizen. But it certainly, as the weather gets cooler and my basement, cools into this sweet spot in the temperature range, I think that it's a really good opportunity, especially when you can make one so easily as this. Yeah. So, well, very good. Well, Dennis, thank you so very much again. Very interesting stuff, and keep in touch on the next round.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks again to Dennis. Dennis has sent me a link to more details about his experiment, and I'll post that link to that page in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. It's a fun one. It's a fun series of experiments, so I hope he continues on his quest for the perfect Hefeweizen. He's way down the road, getting close to that, in my opinion. Those were good beers, all of them. If you have brewing questions, shows, suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. You can get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo. And you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can see listening to the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Cleopatra Adult Costume, Women's Small, and adult meaning the size, not the theme, and Tonka Classic Steel Quarry Dump Truck Vehicle. Very cool. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dutson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.